I only went in for groceries. That's all it was supposed to be, a quick trip to Walmart after a long day. But the moment I felt those eyes on me, I knew something wasn't right. What started as a frozen debit machine turned into something far darker, pulling me into a place I never thought I'd be. By the time the door closed behind me, it was already too late. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late June, the kind of day where the sun bakes everything into a dusty orange hue. I'd just finished a 10-hour shift at the plant, my steel-toe boots leaving small indentations in the gravel lot as I walked toward my car. My throat was dry from the heat, and all I wanted was a cold drink and a quick trip through Walmart to grab some groceries before heading home. The store was only 15 minutes away, but with every mile, the sky seemed heavier, pressing down like a thick, damp blanket. When I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed how quiet it felt for that time of day. A few cars scattered near the entrance, 2 employees in yellow vests corralling carts in slow, lazy arcs. I parked near a light pole, killed the engine, and sat for a moment with the AC blowing on my face, scrolling my phone to decompress. After a few minutes, I stepped out, locking the car behind me, and walked toward the sliding doors. As they whooshed open, a wave of cool air hit me, carrying that familiar scent of cheap floor cleaner and something faintly metallic, maybe the grocery carts. Inside, the store was dimmer than usual, some of the overhead lights flickering like they were on life support. I grabbed a cart, my sneakers squeaking slightly on the linoleum, and headed down the aisles. My list was simple: bread, milk, a few frozen dinners. As I moved through the store, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. At first, I brushed it off, maybe I was just tired. But then I caught the reflection in the freezer glass, a man in a red polo and khakis standing near the end of the aisle, his arms crossed, staring dead at me. I told myself it was nothing. Stores have loss prevention, maybe he was just doing his job. But when I turned down the next aisle, he followed. Not close, just enough to let me know he was there. Each time I slowed down, so did he. I could feel my pulse quicken, that old, familiar tightening in my chest that comes from being too aware of your own skin. I kept my head down, pretended to study a can of beans I didn't need, and wheeled my cart away. By the time I reached the self-checkout, my nerves were frayed. The man in the red polo had vanished, but in his place were 2 cashiers near the service desk, whispering, their eyes darting toward me. My throat felt tight, but I kept my composure, scanning my items slowly, methodically, like someone trying not to trigger an alarm. When I slid my debit card into the reader, the machine beeped, then froze. "See attendant," the screen said in bold letters. I swallowed hard, pressing the button again, but it didn't change. One of the cashiers approached, a white woman in her 50s with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Having some trouble?" she asked, her tone light but edged with something sharp. Before I could answer, the man in the red polo appeared again, standing just behind her, silent, watching me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. I think the machine glitched," I said, forcing a small laugh. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, brittle. She tilted her head. Let me see your ID." I froze. "For what?" "Just standard procedure when the system flags a transaction," she said. Her smile widened, but her eyes stayed flat. Behind her, the man in red shifted slightly, his hand grazing the walkie on his hip. My heart thudded, loud enough that I wondered if they could hear it too. I handed her my ID because what else was I supposed to do? My fingers felt stiff, almost foreign, as I pulled my wallet from my back pocket. She took it without a word, her eyes scanning the plastic like she expected to find a confession etched into the laminate. The man in the red polo leaned in just enough for me to smell his cologne, a sharp, sterile scent that reminded me of hospital corridors. "Wait here," she said, walking toward the service desk with my ID still in her hand. I wanted to protest, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat was dry as bone. I stood there, frozen, while the man in red stayed planted a few feet away, arms crossed. Every second dragged like wet rope. People moved in and out of the store, carts rattling past, laughter spilling from a group of teenagers near the entrance. Life continued around me like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't standing there being silently accused of something I didn't do. Finally, she came back, ID in hand, but no receipt. "We're just waiting on confirmation," she said, smiling that same smile. "Shouldn't be long." "Confirmation for what?" I asked, forcing the words out. My voice cracked, too loud in the hushed hum of the store. Her smile faltered for the briefest second, then returned. "Just standard. These systems, you know how they are." But I didn't know. And I knew she knew I didn't know. My eyes flicked to the exit, bright sunlight spilling through the glass doors like some unreachable freedom. Could I just leave? Walk out and never come back? But then I pictured the cameras, the headlines, the police lights painting my body in blue and red. More time passed. I don't know how much. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't dare move. The man in red hadn't blinked once, or maybe it just felt that way. I stared at his shoes, then at the scuffed floor tiles, tracing the faint gray streaks where carts had dragged years of dirt. Anything to avoid his eyes. Then another man appeared. Older, heavier, with a lanyard around his neck and keys that jingled like loose change. The kind of presence that announces authority without a word. He walked straight up to me, stopping close enough that I could see the pale flakes of skin at the corners of his mouth. "Sir," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "We're gonna need you to come with us." My stomach dropped. "Why?" The word barely escaped my lips. He didn't answer. Just tilted his head toward a door near the back, the one marked employees only. I felt the weight of every eye in the store on me, even if most of them weren't looking. My legs locked up, but somehow, I moved. Each step toward that door felt like sinking deeper into something I'd never crawl out of. Behind me, I could hear the squeak of sneakers, the man in red, following close, his shadow stretching long across the floor. The door opened, a rush of cool, stale air brushing my skin, and then it shut behind us with a sound that felt final. Inside, the room was bare. A table, 2 chairs, a buzzing fluorescent light that made everything look sickly and gray. The older man gestured for me to sit. I did, my hands trembling in my lap. He sat across from me, folded his hands, and stared for a long time. Too long. Then, slowly, almost softly, he said, "Why'd you try to run that card?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper I could barely hear. "You people always think you can get away with it." The light above us hummed louder. My heartbeat pounded in my ears like distant thunder. And then, the door clicked shut again. Someone else had just walked in. I didn't turn to look. I thought I was just another worker finishing a shift, folding clothes, and waiting for closing time. But the whispers started, and then the eyes followed. Before I knew it, I was locked in a back room with 3 men who already believed I was guilty of something I didn't do. And in that moment, I understood, it didn't matter what the truth was. It was a little past 8 p.m. when I clocked in for my shift at the Walmart on the edge of town. The evening crowd was already starting to thin, that lull between the after-work rush and the late-night stragglers. I worked the floor in apparel, which meant hours of folding jeans no one would buy and smiling at customers who barely looked at me. Still, it was a job, and in this economy, that meant something. The store smelled faintly like bleach mixed with fryer grease from the deli. Overhead, the fluorescent lights buzzed with that low, constant hum that gets under your skin if you stand still too long. I tied my blue vest tighter around my waist and walked to my section, mentally preparing myself for another long night. Things were normal at first, mundane even. A couple came in asking about sizes, a kid ran through the aisles playing tag while his mom pretended not to notice. I kept folding, straightening, and smiling. That's what you do. But then I saw him, Mr. Lawson, the store manager, standing near the fitting rooms. He was talking to one of the assistant managers, his eyes flicking over to me every so often. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was about coverage or inventory. But then the whispers started. By the time I reached the stockroom to grab more hangers, I noticed two of my coworkers, girls I'd laughed with on lunch breaks, standing by the door, their voices dropping when I passed. I caught one word before it cut off: theft. My stomach tightened. Theft? From who? From me? No way. I'd been here almost 2 years, never so much as clocked in late. But when I walked back out to the floor, I felt it, eyes. Everywhere. People pretending to browse, their glances sharp and quick when they thought I wasn't looking. Then came the first announcement over the intercom. Manager to apparel. My heart jumped. Lawson appeared minutes later, his expression unreadable. He asked me, in that calm, flat voice, to meet him in the office when I had a minute. I nodded, but inside, I was shaking. On the way there, I noticed the cameras, how the little red lights seemed brighter tonight, blinking like warning signals. Employees I'd known for months avoided my eyes. Some moved out of the aisles when I walked past, as if I were carrying something contagious. When I reached the office door, the glass panel was dark, the blinds drawn. I knocked lightly. It swung open almost immediately, like they'd been waiting. Inside, Lawson was sitting at the table, hands folded, face still calm but his eyes sharp as broken glass. Behind him, two men in plain clothes stood by the wall, loss prevention. Big guys, silent, arms crossed. Close the door, Lawson said. His voice left no room for choice. The lock clicked behind me. And suddenly, the hum of those fluorescent lights felt deafening. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and something metallic, like blood that had dried a long time ago. I sat down across from Lawson because I didn't know what else to do. My hands were damp, my Walmart badge twisting between my fingers like some kind of lifeline. He started slow, like he wanted to sound reasonable. We've been doing some reviews, he said, his voice level, and some things aren't adding up in your section. My throat tightened. What things? Before he could answer, one of the men behind him spoke up. His voice was deep, cold, like he'd practiced this tone for years. Merchandise is missing. Expensive stuff. We have footage. I blinked hard. Footage of what? Of me? Neither of them answered. Lawson leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Why don't you tell us what's going on? Make this easier. My heart pounded so hard I thought they could hear it. I haven't taken anything, I said, my voice trembling. Why would I risk my job for? The bigger man cut me off. You think we don't know? Cameras don't lie. Something about the way he said it made my stomach flip. Cameras don't lie, but people do. And in this room, I was outnumbered 3-1. Lawson slid a paper across the table. It was blank except for a line at the bottom for a signature. Write down what you took, he said, still calm, and this won't have to go any further. We can keep it between us. I stared at the paper, my mind spinning. They wanted me to confess. To something I didn't do. If I signed, maybe they'd let me walk out of here, but then what? Fired? Arrested anyway? When I didn't pick up the pen, the taller man stepped closer. His shadow stretched across the table, swallowing my hands. If you don't cooperate, the cops are waiting outside. Outside. Waiting. My chest seized like a fist had closed around it. I pictured the parking lot, flashing lights, my face pressed against hot asphalt while customers recorded on their phones. Headlines. Shame. I didn't steal anything, I whispered. It didn't sound like my voice anymore. The man didn't move. The other one smiled, a slow, thin smile that said this was a game he'd already won. Lawson sighed, long and heavy, like I'd disappointed him personally. Then he reached for the phone on the desk. "You leave us no choice," he said. The dial tone filled the silence, loud, endless. And as I sat there, staring at that blank sheet of paper, I realized something chilling. Whether I signed it or not didn't matter. The story they wanted was already written. 3 of us walked into that office thinking it was just a few questions. But the second the door locked, I knew the truth wouldn't save us. They had their story, and we were just the characters they'd chosen to play the villains. In that moment, surrounded by silence and suspicion, the real horror began. It started as a regular Tuesday evening. The store lights buzzed overhead like they always did, flickering in that way that makes you wonder if they're dying or just tired like the rest of us. I'd been working at Walmart for almost a year, and most days were predictable: long hours, sore feet, fake smiles. Nothing more, nothing less. But that night felt different, even before things got bad. The break room was crowded when I clocked in. A few of us, mostly black employees, were crammed around the vending machine, laughing about some TikTok video. Then the door opened, and everything stopped. Mr. Turner, the new district manager, walked in with Lawson, our store manager. Both of them stood there in silence for a second too long, eyes sweeping over us like we were items on a clearance rack. "All right, folks," Turner said, his voice low and smooth, "we're gonna be making some changes. Expect tighter security going forward. We've had some issues with shrinkage." Shrinkage. I hated that word. It sounded small, harmless, like something that happens by accident. But we all knew what he meant: theft. The way his gaze lingered on us made it clear who he thought was responsible. After that meeting, everything shifted. Cameras seemed to multiply overnight. Managers started popping up in random aisles, asking employees what they were doing, even when they were clearly working. Customers noticed too. I heard one whisper to another near electronics, "They must have had a problem. Look at all the cameras." The pressure settled like a weight on my chest. Every move felt scrutinized. When I stocked shelves, I could feel someone watching from the corner of their eye. When I helped customers, I noticed managers standing just close enough to listen. Then came the whispers. Not from customers, our own coworkers. 2 guys from receiving stopped talking the second I walked into the stockroom. Another girl told me they were randomly checking lockers now. But somehow, it wasn't so random. Out of the 6 employees pulled in that day, all black. By the end of my shift, I just wanted to get out of there. I clocked out, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. That's when I heard my name over the intercom. "Can you come to the manager's office for a moment?" My stomach turned to ice. When I got there, 2 other employees were already inside, Marcus and Tasha. Both of them looked shaken, their eyes darting to mine for some kind of answer I didn't have. Lawson was there too, leaning against the desk with that same empty smile he always wore. "Just need to ask a few questions," he said, his tone too casual, like this wasn't about to spiral into something ugly. The door clicked shut behind me. The air in that office was heavy, thick with something you couldn't name but could feel in your bones. The blinds were drawn tight, blocking out the bright aisles beyond the glass. Lawson stayed by the desk while 2 other men, security, maybe loss prevention, stood near the door. Their arms were crossed, eyes sharp, like they'd been waiting all night for this. "We've been reviewing some things," Lawson began, his voice flat. "Inventory's off. Big items. Electronics, some clothing. Thousands of dollars gone." None of us spoke. The silence stretched, loud as a siren. Marcus shifted in his seat. "What's that got to do with us?" Lawson tilted his head, that little smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. You tell me. The words hung in the air like a trap. Tasha shook her head slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I've never stolen anything. Lawson didn't even look at her. Instead, he pulled a folder from the desk and slapped it down in front of us. Inside were printed sheets of security stills, grainy, black and white images of people moving through aisles. None of them clear enough to show a face, but he tapped one anyway. Looks like you, doesn't it? He said. His finger on a blurry figure holding a box. It didn't. It could have been anyone. But that wasn't the point. We're gonna make this easy, he continued. You three write down what you took, and maybe this stays internal. No cops, no record. My stomach twisted. Write down what we took. We hadn't taken a thing. Marcus leaned forward, his voice tight. You got proof? Real proof? One of the security guys moved closer. Proof's not the problem. Cooperation is. That word, cooperation, felt like a blade pressed against skin. My hand started to shake in my lap. I thought about my bills, my rent, my little sister starting college next fall. I thought about what happens when they call the police, how fast this could go from bad to worse. Lawson slid 3 blank sheets of paper across the desk. The sound they made was deafening in that tiny room. You can go home after this, he said softly, almost kindly. Just write it down. No one moved. Not a word. Just the buzz of that fluorescent light and the slow, rhythmic thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. Then came the sound that froze me in place, the click of the door locking. And suddenly, I knew, whatever happened next, truth didn't matter. Because in this room, the story was already written. We went to Walmart for groceries, just an ordinary Saturday. But from the moment we walked in, something felt wrong. By the time we reached self-checkout, it was too late. The door locked behind us, the accusations started, and I realized the truth didn't matter anymore. Saturday afternoons at Walmart always feel the same, crowded aisles, screaming kids, carts that squeak like they're dying. I usually avoid the store on weekends, but that day, I didn't have a choice. My mom needed groceries, and I promised I'd help her out. We live in a small town where Walmart is the only big store for miles, so everyone ends up there sooner or later. When we pulled into the parking lot, the heat was brutal, rippling off the asphalt like waves. My mom stayed in the car while I grabbed the list and headed inside with my younger brother, Darius. He's 16, tall for his age, still trying to figure out how to fit his long arms into his own skin. I told him to stick close, but of course, he wandered toward electronics while I went for produce. The store smelled like fried food and bleach, that mix of comfort and something faintly chemical. I loaded up on bread, milk, and vegetables, trying to keep the list in my head. Everything felt normal until I noticed him, a man in a navy vest standing near the end of the aisle. He had a clipboard in one hand, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at me. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. But then, as I moved to the dairy section, there he was again, leaning against the cooler like he had all the time in the world. His eyes didn't leave me for a second. When I finally found Darius, he had a new video game in his hands. I told him to put it back, but he insisted on checking the price. That's when the second man appeared, plain clothes, earpiece tucked behind his ear. He positioned himself right by the aisle exit, arms folded, watching us like we were a problem waiting to happen. Something in my chest tightened. I whispered to Darius to stay calm, don't make sudden moves, just finish up and get out. But when we reached self-checkout, everything slowed down. The screen froze after the second item. A red warning flashed, please wait for assistance. Before I could even wave someone over, 2 men appeared, the one with the vest and the guy from electronics. They didn't speak right away. just stood there, boxing us in. "Having some trouble?" the vest guy finally said, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. "Machine froze," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. He nodded slowly, then glanced at my brother, who suddenly looked about 5 years old with that game still in his hands. "You planning on paying for that?" he asked. Darius opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My heart dropped into my stomach. And then the man leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for me to hear. "Why don't you two come with us?" The whole store seemed to go quiet. I felt the air shift the moment he said it. The sounds of carts clattering and kids yelling faded into a dull hum behind my ears. I glanced at Darius, his knuckles white around that game case, his face frozen somewhere between fear and confusion. "We didn't do anything," I said, my voice steady but thin. The man in the vest smiled, a slow, patient smile that made my skin crawl. "Then this won't take long." They guided us away from self-checkout, their bodies close enough to block every exit. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through something thick and unseen. People stared as we passed, some curious, some whispering, but no one said a word. They led us through a door near the back marked "Employees Only." The lock clicked behind us, and suddenly we were in a gray room with a metal table and 2 chairs. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering every so often like it was trying to die. "Sit," the man in plain clothes said. Not a request. We sat. My palms were damp, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. The man in the vest leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes never leaving us. "So," he began casually, "you wanna explain what you were doing in electronics?" Darius stammered. I was just looking." "Looking?" The word came out like a blade. "Funny, because our cameras show you slipping that game into your pocket." My stomach twisted. "That's not true," I said sharply. The man's eyes flicked to me, cold and flat. "You calling me a liar?" "No," I said, forcing my voice low. "But you're wrong. He didn't take anything." The plainclothes guy pulled a folder from the desk, sliding it open with deliberate slowness. Inside were black and white stills, blurry, grainy shapes that could have been anyone. He tapped one with his finger. "Looks like you to me." It wasn't. But that didn't matter. I could see it in his face, the decision was already made. "Here's how this works," he said. "You admit what you did, we keep it internal. No cops, no records. Make it easy." "And if we don't?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. He smiled. Not with his mouth, just his eyes. "Then we call the police." "You really want your little brother in cuffs? You want your mama watching that on the news?" The words hit like a punch to the gut. I looked at Darius, his hands shaking, his eyes glassy with fear, and something in me broke. Because I knew this wasn't about truth. It never was. The man slid 2 blank sheets of paper across the table, along with a pen. "Write it down," he said softly. "Both of you." I stared at the paper, my pulse roaring in my ears. In that moment, I understood the horror wasn't the threat of jail, or the cameras, or the locked door. The horror was knowing that in this room, we didn't exist as people anymore. We were just the story they wanted to tell. I thought she would protect me. After all, she was my manager, someone who understood what it meant to be like me in this place. But when the door locked and the men closed in, I realized I was wrong. In that gray room, under that buzzing light, I learned the truth: loyalty doesn't matter when the system already chose your guilt. I'd been at Walmart for 5 years, long enough to know the rhythm of the place, the morning rush, the quiet hum of the afternoon, the chaos of evenings when tired parents drag cranky kids through crowded aisles. For the most part, I kept my head down and did my job. As a black man working under a black woman manager, I thought we understood each other in ways no one else here did. Maybe that's why what happened still doesn't feel real. It was a Wednesday, mid-shift, and the store smelled faintly of mop water and something fried from the deli. I was stocking in electronics when I heard my name over the intercom. Please report to the manager's office. My stomach tightened, even though I couldn't think of a reason why. When I got there, Tanya, the manager, was behind the desk, her expression blank, the blinds drawn tight. Two men I didn't recognize stood against the wall, both in dark polos with badges clipped to their belts. Close the door, Tanya said softly. I did, the sound of the latch clicking echoing too loud in that cramped space. Sit down, she added, her voice flat in a way that made my skin prickle. I lowered myself into the chair across from her, trying to ignore the weight of those two men's eyes pressing against my back. Tanya didn't look at me right away. She stared down at a folder, tapping it lightly with her nails, the rhythm steady, deliberate. Do you know why you're here? She asked finally. No, I said slowly, my throat dry. She looked up then, her face calm but cold, like someone had switched something off inside her. We've had some reports, she said. Big-ticket items disappearing from electronics. Cameras picked up some irregularities. My stomach dropped. You think I took something? She didn't answer. One of the men stepped forward, setting a stack of papers on the desk. Blurry black and white stills, figures moving through aisles, faces too unclear to mean anything. He tapped one. Looks like you, doesn't it? I stared at the photo. It didn't look like me. But that didn't matter, did it? Tanya's voice was soft when she spoke again, almost kind, like a mother coaxing a confession out of a child. We're trying to help you here. Just write down what happened, and we can handle this internally. No police. No job loss. My hands went cold. Behind me, I heard the door click again as one of the men turned the lock. That sound was louder than anything else in the room. The hum of the fluorescent light felt like it was drilling into my skull. Tanya slid a sheet of paper and a pen across the desk. Her nails tapped against the wood, that same slow rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. Write down what you took, she said, voice low and calm. Make this easy. I didn't take anything, I said, my words catching in my throat. Tanya, you know me. Her eyes flicked up, sharp and empty. I know what I need to know, she said. The man closest to the door moved forward, his shadow stretching long across the floor. This doesn't have to get ugly, he said, his tone like gravel. Cooperate, and you walk out tonight. Don't, and the cops get involved. I could feel sweat trickling down my back. Images flashed in my head, blue and red lights, cuffs biting into my wrists, my mother's face when she sees my mugshot on the news. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't steal anything, I repeated, softer this time, almost a whisper. The man leaned in close, so close I could feel the heat of his breath against my ear. Then you won't mind writing something down. He slid the paper closer until it touched my arm. The blank page stared up at me like an open grave. When I didn't move, Tanya sighed, a long, heavy sound that seemed to pull the air out of the room. She reached for the phone on her desk. All right, she said quietly, if that's how you want this to go. The man behind me spoke again. His voice colder than before. Police are right outside. I looked at Tanya one last time, hoping for something, anything, that said this wasn't what it seemed. But her face stayed still, her eyes flat, like I was nothing more than a name on a report she had to finish before her shift ended. And in that moment, I understood something I'll never forget. Even with someone who looks like you on the other side of the desk, the system doesn't change. The door stayed locked. The paper stayed blank. And the buzzing light above us hummed like it would never, ever stop. Thanks so much for watching. Your support truly means the world to me. Every like, every comment helps this channel grow and keeps me going. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new upload. My dream right now is to reach 100 subscribers, and with your help, I know it's possible. See you in the next one.